In a sport that's filled with characters and memorable fights, it's a hard world to stand out in. In this week's Top 10, we focus on our 10 standout moments. For the wrong reasons. This is our Top 10 WTF Moments in MMA, where we count down the 10 moments that made us say, "What the fuck?" Diego Sanchez has never been too far away from the weird and wonderful, with several bizarre moments throughout his journeyed UFC career. The most bizarre came during his walk to the cage at UFC 95 to face Joe Daddy Stevenson in a title eliminator bout. Sanchez famously screamed, "Yes! Yes! Yes!" over and over on his walk to the cage. The fight card was UFC 133. The fight was Hallman vs. Bryant Ebersole, and the fight gear was a tiny blue Speedo that boss Dana White was disgusted over. Hallman sported the undies as part of a bet he lost. The fight wouldn't last long, as Hallman would be TKO'd in the first, and White would go as far as awarding Ebersole an extra $70,000 for getting Hallman off screen as quickly as he could. White was quoted as saying, "I've never been so embarrassed," with Hallman saying, "I thought it was funny. I didn't think anyone would be cross about it." Fighters react to things differently, especially when they think they have lost. At UFC 148, Forrest Griffin's reaction was about as WTF as it gets. After a close battle against Tito Ortiz, Griffin assumed that he had lost the fight and the trilogy and didn't feel like waiting for Bruce Buffer to make the announcement. Instead, the former world champion ran to the back to spare himself humiliation. UFC President Dana White ran after Griffin, forcing him into the cage where he was awarded the decision victory. In what was built as the final fight of his career, Tito waited for his final interview where he was expected to give a farewell speech to the fans. Instead, Griffin snatched the microphone and conducted a bizarre interview with Ortiz, robbing him of his final moment in the UFC. The event was UFC 134 in Brazil, and Palhares was taking on the always tough Dan Miller. He would land a nasty head kick that put Miller down and swarmed with punches as he covered up. Miller wasn't taking a whole lot of damage, but we were clearly only seconds away from Herb Dean waving the fight off. Palhares apparently thought he had done enough and didn't wait for Dean to call it off. The controversial star climbed the cage wall and began celebrating as Herb Dean was pulling him off. Palhares would go on to win the fight by decision. In a rematch that had all sorts of bad blood, Brock Lesnar defeated Frank Mir via TKO to retain his heavyweight title. What happened after the fight is almost as memorable as the fight itself. Lesnar would start by screaming into the camera and foaming at the mouth. He would get face to face with Mir as his bloodied and battered body tried to stand up straight. Lesnar would scream, "Talk all the shit you want now." Lesnar would then get on the microphone, trashing Mir, laughing at the fans who booed him, and taking a shot at UFC sponsor Bud Light, saying he was going to go home and drink another beer because Bud Light wouldn't sponsor him. Lesnar ended the interview by saying, "I'll probably climb on top of my wife." Please subscribe to the channel for content made by fans for the fans. Click the bell to be notified when we go live. This was, without exaggeration or hesitation, the worst fight in modern MMA history. It featured a 42-year-old Slice who had only fought once in 5 years, and an out-of-shape Dada 5000 who had zero experience in the fight game and came in looking like what many journalists called the worst fighter of all time. What occurred was a 3-round snooze fest that saw both fighters gas early and barely able to keep themselves off the ground, let alone throw strikes. John McCarthy had to constantly speak to both fighters about where to stand, how to strike, and to keep up the pace. Kimbo would eventually finish the fight in the third, and Dada would be carted off on a stretcher, resulting in easily the worst fight Bellator has ever booked. Following his 2017 bout with Demian Maia at UFC Fight Night 119 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, he called the country a dump and referred to the Brazilian crowd as filthy animals. He would refuse the translator, and on his way from the octagon to backstage, Covington had 10 security guards covering him up as the irate crowd threw things at him. He would then get banned from the post-fight press conference. The main event featured Jake Shields defending his middleweight belt against Dan Henderson in a CBS broadcast event. Shields would win via unanimous decision, and during the post-fight interview, Jason Miller would gain access to the cage and interrupt Shields asking, "Where's my rematch, buddy?" After both Gilbert Melendez and Shields pushed Miller away, Nick Diaz threw the initial punch to start the full-scale brawl. Members of the Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu camp, including Melendez, Nick, and Nate Diaz, attacked Miller while Miller was restrained on the canvas by members of Diaz's camp. The fight was then broken up by referees, members of Henderson's corner, and members of security. The brawl resulted in CBS canceling its half of Strikeforce's television contract. When Khabib met Conor McGregor, the drama that surrounded the fight was massive, and the trash talk that ensued was personal and vicious. The event drew an attendance of 20,034 fans, generating a live gate revenue of $17.2 million. It set the record for the highest ever mixed martial arts attendance and live gate in Nevada. It also set the record for the biggest MMA pay-per-view event, with 2.4 million buys in the United States. Nurmagomedov would win the fight by fourth-round submission and immediately jump the cage to attack Dylan Dennis. Soon after, McGregor and Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov also tried to climb out of the octagon, but a scuffle broke out between them. Back in the octagon, McGregor was then attacked by two of Nurmagomedov's cornermen. Massive fines were doled out, pay was withheld, and a massive black mark will forever be linked to this event. Conor McGregor made headlines for all the wrong reasons when he and a group of men invaded a UFC press conference in search of Khabib Nurmagomedov, who had famously slapped McGregor teammate Artem Lobov. McGregor proceeded to hurl a hand dolly at the fighter bus, shattering glass and causing lacerations to lightweight fighter Michael Chiesa and flyweight fighter Ray Borg. Borg would also reportedly suffer eye injuries from the glass. Both fights would be pulled from the card. Lobov, who had an undercard fight that weekend, was pulled from UFC 223, and White would accuse him of involvement in the incident in coordination with McGregor. The police would charge McGregor with 3 counts of assault over the incident. He was taken into custody in Brooklyn after turning himself in to the police. Thank you for watching our Top 10 WTF Moments in MMA history. We'll be back next week with another Top 10. Don't forget to like and subscribe.